Welcome to Ground and Grace. I'm one of your hosts, Cecil Carlisle. Alongside me is
Eli Meeks.
And Micah Meeks.
Today we're going to be talking about loving one another and what biblical grounds, or not biblical grounds, what the Bible has to say about loving others, loving your spouses, loving your brothers, loving your sisters, and just loving difficult people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of difficult people out there.
Everybody has somebody in their life that they are probably thinking of right now that they're like, I cannot love that person fully.
Yeah, his name's Cecil.
Yeah. Or like, I'm trying to, but every single time I try to love them, it seems like something else happens that just makes it so much harder.
Yeah. No, it's one of the struggles that we go through. Our flesh, and that's what it comes down to. It's a fleshly issue, right? I'm going to open this up just with Ephesians 5:1-2, and that's kind of the grounds in which we're going to argue all these points and all these kind of situations.
Yep.
And so Ephesians 5:1-2 state this: follow God's example. Therefore, as dearly loved children, and walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and a sacrifice to God.
All right.
But that's kind of like where we're going to draw our bases out of, right? Christ was the ultimate illustration of love for us, where we're so undeserving of his love and his grace and his mercy, but yet he gave it so freely. He calls us to love one another. You see here all the time, love your neighbor as yourself. Yep. Where the situations become difficult is when you have people who are walking in the flesh and who are just rude individuals, and you go, how in the world do I love this individual? And so we're going to we might share some stories here today, talk about one another, how rude Micah is to Eli and I.
Yeah.
No, actually, if there's anything, it's Micah and I against Eli. We were just talking
all the time. Oh, my word.
We were just talking about this podcast. I just told Eli, I said, Micah and I had a meeting without you. And he looked at us like, oh, goodness, what happened? I said, you get one veto for a topic. Mike and I get unlimited.
I was actually the one that thought of this topic because I was like, we just talked about different things that they were being mean to me about, like digging trenches, how they said I do nothing, or when we were making this studio kind of thing. And I was just taking care of Lainey. And then
talking to Chloe.
They're like,
and talking to Chloe.
Yeah. And they're like, you do nothing anymore.
But he can't handle tough love.
Yeah, so
It's a type
they're
of
the
love.
people that are
Learn it.
unlovable in my life.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the ones that are like our wives or our girlfriends that were just
Fiance.
Sorry,
Yeah,
right. Girlfriend. Sorry. Let's talk about them first. Sometimes often seems easier to love those individuals, right? They're the ones that are closest to us. But yet sometimes it seems like the hardest because they are so close to us, right?
Yeah.
At least for me, there's individuals in my life that irritate me, and sometimes I don't want to love, but I can ignore them and not love them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I can't ignore Alicia.
Yeah.
And so when we get into rifts and when we get into fights, I find myself kind of coming back to this verse, right?
Mm-hmm.
My love is a sacrifice. So in this moment, how do I sacrifice for the benefit of Alicia, right? Now, does it take me a little bit to get there sometimes? Absolutely, right? My flesh flares up. There's no doubt about that. But it's a constant reminder, right? It's a constant reminder of I need to choose to focus my eyes on the Lord and allow the Lord to love Alicia in this moment. And that's a choice, right? There's a choice to focus your eyes on him and to sacrifice. And that can only come supernaturally through the Holy Spirit, to sacrifice for Alicia, because the world tells us, no, you're right. So stand up for being right? Mm-hmm. You did put up the groceries, or you did put up the dishes. You just seen the situation wrong, where that's not always what you're fighting, right? You need to sacrifice. You need to put down your flesh, right? That's the essence of sacrifice too. You're putting down yourself to understand, but then also point her and she point me back to Christ, so we can find our unity there, right? That's how I love Alicia. Is I focus on Jesus, not on the situation or my flesh, and allow my flesh to control myself.
Yeah, like the second half of the verse is talking about how we're supposed to love because we're supposed to love unto the Lord, basically. Like, I think it's really easy to see the person and see all that they've done either wrong or in the circumstance that they're that you're struggling with, like every negative part, but we're not loving them because we actually love this person. It's not always just a feeling of love. It's because we're called to love the Lord. And it talks about, I don't know what book it was, but it talks about in the Bible how, when we're loving other people and we're housing them and everything, it's like we're loving out into the Lord, and it will be repaid for that with heavenly rewards. And so I think that's the whole thing, is that no matter how many times a single person wrongs you or a single person is so hard to love, we're not doing it because of this person. It's not a feeling of love. It's a choice of love.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I think where marriage differs from like a friend's love, is that we think that with marriage, you're going to love that person. It's just an instinct, right?
Yeah.
But as our Father has always said, love is a choice. Love is not always a feeling.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so you have to continuously choose to love. Where Christ, it says, he walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. He chose to love us. He created us to be with him, but he chose to love us. He didn't have to, but he chose to, and he sacrificed himself for us so that we may be with him if we put our trust in him, right?
Yeah.
And so just as, Christ is the groom and we are the bride as the church, as grooms, as a future groom, right, we are to love our wives, sacrifice ourselves for our wives, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not always a feeling. You're not always going to feel it. I can tell you, it's not always a feeling for me.
Yeah.
But it's a choice I have to make daily to humble myself, put myself down, and look to her needs and look to what she needs so that I can show her love.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's dying to self every day.
Yeah.
Like, it's choosing to wake up every single day and not choose yourself, but choose God and your spouse over yourself every single day.
Yeah, and it's an important part to remember, kind of the man's role in your marriage and the woman's role in your marriage is, a man's supposed to illustrate Christ, and the woman's supposed to illustrate the church, right? And in Ephesians 2, where it talks about a woman submitting, right, or a woman respecting her husband, but men, our responsibility is to be like Christ. And what did Christ do for his people? Sacrifice himself.
Yeah.
He died on the cross for our sins. And how much, and that's the example we have in our marriage, is that we're supposed to imitate that love, that sacrifice, and that grace.
Yeah. But I would also say, like, you look at Jesus' love and it wasn't all submitting. Like, Jesus was not a submitter. So I think men are still called to be obviously leaders in the relationship and also call things out. Like, you see the Sermon on the Mount, he's talking specifically to Pharisees, and they're doing these things wrong. So I think in today's society, love is seen as almost submitting and just being okay with what everybody's doing. But if you look into Bible times, Jesus is radical in the way he's living his life with calling people out, and then not just calling them out, but you can see with Nicodemus how he's having personal conversation too, not just in front of crowds, and trying to lead him in a way it's going to be glorifying. So I think as men, we're supposed to help kind of lead that and call people out and then guide them in the way that's going to be right.
Yeah, there's a balance there because, Jesus was in the temple flipping over tables.
Yeah.
Righteous love, right? He was also showing the grace and the love to prostitutes. And, there's such a balance there, right? And that's where we're going to overemphasize our reliance upon him, allowing him to lead in those situations, even with your wife, right? You see in Revelation where he's calling out churches, right? Back to your point, of calling out even in your relationship with the rights and wrongs in relationships, right? And so there, really the purpose though is to, from a man's point of view, is to fully understand that though, right? Our responsibility in our relationships with our wives to love them. It's a sacrificial love, right? So often we're like, what can she bring into my life? What can she do for me, right? The ultimate love story is the love of Jesus unto his people and unto his children. So
Well, and a common misconception is that to be right is also loving, right? But it's not always the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, Christ, he was right in everything he did, but he was, he was put on the cross, and he could have, pulled himself off that cross, and he could have screamed from the mountaintops and said, like, you all need to believe in me. Like, I want you to be in heaven. That's not what he did, right? He laid himself down, and he didn't try to overpower and be right necessarily. He was showing love. And so with your wives, you could have an argument and you could be 100% right and still not be loving her.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing you have to, figure out within your relationship, and learn. It's not something that just is natural for us, right? As guys, we want to be right. And that's what we can do. It's with our jobs. We want to be good at our jobs. We want to be right in what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But sometimes loving your wife is, not putting that out there, not saying, okay, you know what, this is the right way. This is what we're going to do. It's saying, I'm listening to you.
Yeah.
And your opinion is very valid, and it might not be the best opinion, or it could be the best opinion, but still just listening and loving and being soft in what you say.
Yeah. And still directing. That's kind of back to Eli's point. I think it's, these are all so situational, right?
Yeah.
Because it depends on the wife. Is she following the Christ in that time period? Is she not? Is she walking in the flesh?
Right.
Are you walking everything's so situational, and we can only really testify to it, or we can only testify to a man's point of view, right? Because we're all young boys wanting to be men, but and so that's, of course, that's kind of the point of view we're going to come from. But there's just such a high importance on it that I feel like men forget, or they look at Ephesians 2 and they go, "You're supposed to submit, woman."
Yeah.
Right.
Well, moving on from just a spouse, because I think the spouse is probably one of the easier people to love because you're choosing them. But from your point of view, Cecil, two different things. First off, when you have somebody come into your office, which I'm sure you've had in your years of ministry, that's just annoyed or upset about something, or somebody that emails you or calls you about something that they're just like, they're so upset about. First off, Proverbs talks about how correcting a wise person will bring more wisdom. And so how do you handle it if the person is not being wise? Because you're still told to call people out, and if they're believers, you need to deal with them and kind of help them. But if they're not being wise, then what are you supposed to do with that?
Yeah, that was a good question. I actually learned this from my dad, and then also in the these last years from your dad. You probably heard this a million times, but because there has been situations where people have come in angry or got angry messages, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I was following the Lord in this. How am I wrong? But how do I deal with this angry individual? And so I'll just walk you through. Somebody walks into my office and they're outraged about something. You can throw anything on the wall, right? The first thing that I will do is in a very calm voice, look at them straight in their eyes and say, I love you, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'll just call it, I'll just plainly, and I got that from your dad. Yeah. Right? I love you. And then 100% of the time, they'll go, yeah. And that second just brings the elevation down 10 notches. It went from, to, yeah. Right? Yeah. So that is like the first step, reassuring them of my love towards them, or of their kids, or of whoever they're, frustrated about. And then we'll walk through the problem. Right? Okay, tell me from your point of view the problem. What, if it's with me, what did I do? If it's somebody else and you don't think I handled it properly, give me your perspective of this issue. And then I'll graciously give them mine. Hey, this is why I decided to do this. This is why I decided to say this. And if I was wrong, I will plainly call that out to them. No, you're right. I was wrong. And then somewhere in that conversation, what has more often than not happened, they'll admit they're wrong for coming into my office or sending me the email in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And so just being calm, that calm presence, and also just reminding them of first Christ's love, but then Christ's love in and through me towards them is such an amazing thing, right? And also you have to understand that 100%, if maybe 90% of the people coming into my office frustrated about things or write me emails or whatever the case may be, 90% of those are believers. right? So we have that common kind of, yeah, we're trying to seek the Lord, even though one of us might be walking in our flesh. But if we, in that first couple seconds, go back to Christ and say just that admission of love for each other, really kind of deflates the situation and can be reminded of Christ's love. And then the situation, when we handle the situation, because there's a lot of different perspectives. There's a lot of right and wrongs. In my ministry, it's a lot of kids' perspectives, which aren't always the most trustworthy. And then I could go, that's not actually how it happened. And the parent goes, oh, okay. And so, yeah, we walk through that just very graciously. Because, what does our flesh want to do, right? My flesh wants to go, how dare you come into my office and yell at me? You're complete, and just lay in. But if you just deflate the situation and then talk about the issue.
Yeah,
and that's not love when you do that, right? If you were to do that and just yell at them, that's not showing them love. It's going back to it. It's escalating the situation and taking it out of proportion.
Yeah,
and more than it needs to be. When you could just say, "Hey, I love you," and just set that tone for the rest of the conversation. It just changes the mindset and how you go about it. And when you have that same mindset of, okay, you're coming from two different perspectives, two different sides, but our common goal, our common theme is Christ, right?
Yeah.
You can find somewhere to meet. You might still have different viewpoints on different things, and that's okay. There's absolutes, there's preferences, and then there's convictions, right? And so unless it's an absolute, you have a conviction that could be different from somebody else. A preference is completely different from somebody else, right? And so there is that scale that you have to live with and be okay. We might not agree, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. What about taking a step back? Or did you have something else? Sorry.
Well, I was going to say with unbelievers, it's a different kind of thing too. Like you can still have the same kind of conversation, but I think there's almost a bigger weight with unbelievers because you are representing the Lord in a way that they don't have necessarily in their life in a lot of ways. So if an unbeliever is coming at me and saying, hey, you're doing all this stuff wrong, I think that I need to it probably is close to the same approach, but I need to be able to understand that I might be the only person in their life that is going to represent Christ to them. Mm-hmm. And so right now I have a responsibility to show them love in a way that Christ has shown them love. And that conversation might look different because, you can show a believer love and call them out by showing them love. But an unbeliever, I don't know if you're going to call out as much. You might be more like, okay, I see what you're talking about. I love you. I'm going to work on it. Instead of being like, well, these are the points, like, I love you and I see this. These are the points that I think you need to consider and you need to, like, ponder in your own heart. Because with an unbeliever, you're talking to a completely different, like, you have a different set of rules almost. Yeah.
And I think the importance in that when it comes to an unbeliever, right? You work in a secular department and a secular company. And, what I've seen in my past career is like you just said, handle it similarly, because again, if an unbeliever goes to an unbeliever, they're just going to explode on each other and they're just going to fight, right? So if somebody in your work comes to you and they're very angry at you for whatever reason, and you calmly just go, hey, I hear you. Okay, let's talk about this. That's going to be like, whoa, what is different about this guy?
Yeah.
What is going on? Why is he acting so calm? Right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you introduce it with, hey, just know I love you, right? I'm not saying that's appropriate for every work situation, but it's simple like, I hear you. Yeah, let's talk about this. And just staying calm. They're going to look at that and go, man, there's something a little different, right? There's a work story that I have. So I was a lineman for 6 years before I became a pastor. And no, not a lineman for the Dallas Cowboys.
Electrical.
Not that big. But there was a situation where this guy literally was throwing tools, right? And he was so mad at me for doing something, right? And I was in the wrong. I did something not up to code, and he was having to pay the consequences for it because I was foreman at the time, and he was sent out there to fix it. And he comes back and throwing stuff and cussing me out, and he was a big guy, and I simply just walked up to him and say, hey, I'm so sorry. I was so wrong. That totally did not meet code there. That was all my fault. I'm sorry that I wasn't sent out, that you were. That was not in my control, because he thought that I was making him fix my wrongdoings, right? I'm like, hey, that was not me. I'm sorry. I wish I was out there with you. And again, just that calm presence just went whoop, and deflated the situation. And he asked me, I kid you not, a month later, he asked me, he goes, remember when I got in that big fight? And he almost got fired, actually, for this situation, because he was throwing tools at me. And he goes, yeah, remember when we got in that big fight? And I go, yeah, I remember when you threw a wrench at me. And he goes, why were you so calm? And then, boom, now I get to introduce the gospel.
Yeah.
Now I get to talk to him about Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And so often we're like, how do we get the gospel in here? Trust the Lord with that process, right? Because as he's throwing wrenches at me, it's probably not the time to talk about the gospel. Be like, hey, let me talk to you about Jesus. As wrenches are going past your face, right? But just introducing that calm nature, showing him the love of Jesus in that moment. To him, then a month later, going, why were you so calm, right? Because if it was anybody else, we would have been fist fighting, and you were extremely calm, right?
Yeah.
I think it's huge.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be like you have that kind of like work relationship with somebody. Chloe has come home from working at a grocery store many days and was like, these people were not patient with me. Like, she's trying to bag or she's trying to check people, and like they're just like, you need to be faster. And she's kind of new, so she's trying to go as fast as she can. And when they're just so upset, she's like, I'm trying to go as fast as I can. I'll try to speed it up a little bit. And she's just calm with it. And that's something that I think every single person can find a way to have patience in their job. And there will be people angry at you, no matter what job you're at. And so there is ways to have patience, and you don't have to have a coworker that's impatient. You can have a person that's that you're helping, and they can be so rude, and just show them the love of God, and maybe God's going to pop an opportunity in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I was laughing because he just said, you're always going to have somebody mad at you, right? Another famous Nate Meeks saying is, if you want to make people happy, go give out free ice cream.
Yeah.
So.
Let me ask you guys this then. We've been talking about if somebody comes to us, right, and they're upset.
Yeah.
What if we flip it around? What if we as a believer go to an unbeliever and we're upset? How do we handle that situation? What do you guys think? Because that's a tough situation when you're the one that's upset. Maybe they wronged you, maybe they didn't, but you have this anger or whatever, resentment in your heart.
Yeah.
And you want to approach that unbeliever. How should we approach that situation?
Well, I think first off, you should not approach it at all until you've been in the Word and you've been praying about it.
Sure.
Because I had a roommate last year that this kind of thing happened with, where I was like, I need to approach him. And my RA was like, dude, have you been praying about this, and have you been in the Word? And so I took an extra couple days to pray about it and be in the Word. And my approach to him changed a lot, because I went in it being angry and like, I'm just going to tell this guy all he's doing wrong. And then I was able to go in there and say, let's just talk. Let's talk this through. And it went a lot better. And so I think that you can have the ability, well, I guess this is still a believer, but you can have the ability to approach them with an unbeliever or a believer and do it in a way that's going to be great. But if you're not going to prayer and the Word first, you're going to be doing it out of anger, and you are not going to say the things you actually want to say.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's just that goes for believers and unbelievers. Is just, again, coming up with that calm presence, with having, because there's going to be run-ins with, if you're working in this world where you're going to disagree with a coworker, but not to implode on them and to be angry with them, but to be gracious with them. I think too, if we want to get like in the church, right? When you're angry, Paul talks about when you're angry or you have a disagreement with an elder of the church, right?
Yeah.
That there needs to be two other witnesses that witnessed this wrongdoing of the elder. Mm-hmm. And so going properly, doing those proper steps of bringing people with you to say, hey, we've noticed this, right? If it's a sin issue, if it's, I don't know. I can't think of anything right at the second, but like couple seeing somebody drunk at a bar, an elder drunk at a bar, right? I don't know, whatever situation it is. And in going through those proper channels, reading what Paul has to say about how do you go about those situations. But yeah, just in kind of generic terms, just doing it graciously.
Yeah. And I think also knowing fully the circumstance before you talk to somebody. About a couple months ago, I was in the wrong for something at our church when it came to drumming. Okay, there was something I was an idiot, and I was like, "This is the way that you do drumming," and so I was making it really difficult for another drummer of ours for like months. And what I really appreciated about him, and the reason that we can still talk and be like civil with each other, is that he didn't directly approach me right away. He first talked to my dad and was like, "Is this something that your son is doing?" Because I don't want to accuse him if it's not.
Mm.
And it's just been a pattern that I've seen happening, and I don't know what to do about it necessarily. And so he was mature enough to not just text me or call me and be like, "Dude, what the heck are you doing?" And so that, and knowing like he got evidence first, and then he also didn't just directly approach me. He was kind of like, "Hey, I don't want this to be a really like mean thing against him." So he kind of brought it up to my dad, and my dad was able to bring it up to me because he knew that he wasn't necessarily the right person to bring it up to me. And so I think that he did it in a way that was just amazing, and he knew everything he needed to know instead of just bringing an accusation. And he knew that he wasn't necessarily the guy to do it. So I think there's also that when you're going into conflicts, you need to think about those things too.
And he sought counsel, right?
Yeah.
In both the situations, even your frustration with somebody at school, you sought counsel. With his frustration with you, he sought counsel, right? I think that's a huge thing, to seek biblical counsel, right? To go somebody who you know is biblically mature and say, "Hey, this is the situation. How do you think I should handle it? How do I show this person that I can't stand right now love?"
Yeah.
Right? And to talk about those things. Right?
Or even humble yourself and say, "Am I in the wrong?"
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
hard
yeah.
to do as men here. We don't want to be wrong, but
Yeah.
humbling yourself and just asking them, like a trusted third party, seeking counsel that is a Bible believer, especially if it's between two believers that are having tension.
Yeah.
Say, "Am I in the wrong? If I'm in the wrong, tell me, because I need to know that, because this is how I'm seeing it. I don't see their perspective."
Yeah.
Right. And so I think it's just so important, like you were saying.
Yeah. Okay, last situation. Wonder if it is like us. Wonder if we're angry at each other. I have
I'm getting
I have
off
a
the podcast. Yeah.
I have a story, but
You have a
us
story?
yeah, not of us
Oh.
three. Me and Micah.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Like if we're angry at each other, you're saying what's the circumstance?
No, yeah, like how do we handle out between like people who we're not married, right? We don't live together.
Yeah.
We're not just people who go to church together. We're not co-workers, but you guys are brothers, of course. But we're all three very close friends, right? We are in and out of each other's lives. There's not a week goes by that I don't see you guys or talk to you guys or text you guys or hang out with you guys. If we're beefing, how do you handle that? How do you show each other love?
As guys, we just forget a lot. So
Yeah.
We do.
I
Can we
that
share my
helps us.
story?
Share your story, because I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay.
A more theological answer than we just forgive each other. I know. I know.
Sorry, that is
in Bible school we were talking about unity, and how it never tells us in the Bible to create unity. It tells us to keep unity.
Yeah.
And so we are not told to figure out how to be unified. We're told to be connected to the Spirit, and the Spirit will unify us. And so I think when we try so hard to change other people or change ourselves because we're like, well, something's not unified here, instead of going to God directly, that's when we start trying to create our own unity. But we already have a unity. Like, what stronger unity can we have than the Lord? So when we go to the Lord, and I think if we seek the Lord as a group, like if me and you are upset, Cecil and I are upset with Micah, then I think we should go to Micah and say, "Hey, let's talk about this and look at Scripture," instead of trying to say, "Hey, you're doing this wrong," or "I'm doing this wrong," and it's just opinion versus opinion. There's obviously like right and wrong, but if it's just opinion based, we need to go to the Lord and seek the unity there.
And that's usually the case, right? When you're walking, with us three, we're all three walking with the Lord and have a biblical background and are seeking the Lord. And it's always a preference issue. It's never a set in stone issue. It's not that we're fighting over, salvation, right? So here's my story.
Okay.
Yeah, we talked about this.
Probably have.
There's one fight that Mike and I have ever had.
I'm
Okay,
interested.
it was a year and a half, and it wasn't even really a fight. We just were both angry at each other. So we were creating a church logo for our
Yep.
for a high
Got
school
you, I
group,
got you.
right? And so, anyways, I came on as a youth pastor about a year and a half ago, and I wanted to revive the church, the high school ministry logo. And so I asked my youth leaders, which Mike is one of them, and him and his wife. I asked them to give me their inputs on kind of my idea, and then to give me ideas, right? Well, Micah is a very creative individual. He likes to make logos, and like with our podcast logo, I think he created that, and he just likes doing those things, right? So he was sending me different logos. He was sending the big group chat of different logos, and it wasn't quite what I wanted, and I kind of envisioned for what I wanted for the Reach logo, and then what ended up kind of happening is I was not putting down Micah's logo, but I was kind of like, nah, try again. And he, to mine, was like, nah, try again. Because we just both didn't like each other's logos.
This was all over text.
And this was all over text,
Yeah.
right? And what happened, and I wasn't even aware of, is we ended up having the whole high school team kind of like picking sides over this, because nobody else was adding logos to this group chat.
I chose Micah's side. Micah's side was better.
Yeah, but
Thank you.
but what ended up happening is, and what I think ended up happening was people were signing with me just because I'm the youth pastor, right? They don't really have a preference, so they're like, we'll just go with Pastor Cecil's, right? So then Micah felt like, man, Cecil just got a whole clan against me in this group chat, and I'm thinking, why is Micah being so defiant, right? Why is he? There's no grace with my logo. And in hindsight, there was no grace with me with his logo. And so what ended up happening is we kind of like, we just didn't talk. Like we weren't texting as much as we usually did. We weren't interacting as much as we did. It wasn't like a couple of weeks. It was just a couple of days.
Yeah.
Like I said, we're so close. We interact with each other almost on a daily occurrence.
Yeah.
And so there was a couple of days where I was just like, oh, Micah's just being such a turd. He won't take my logo and edit it. He's just making his own. And
Because your logo sucked.
because my logo sucked, his logo sucked, in my humble
great.
opinion.
Yeah.
And anyways, long story short, what ended up happening is we just kind of forgot about the stupid logo, and we just started talking about other things and kind of get back to our normal pace in life. And then finally, we're like, okay, we can't come to an agreement, right? I never want to be a dictator over youth ministry, so I want to have his input. I don't like his logo. He doesn't like my logo. So we ended up deciding, kind of as a group, let's give it over to the students then.
Yeah.
Right? Let's let the students not pit each other against me and you, but let them make their own logos, and then let's bring it back to the group and let's just choose which the best
We'll
logo
pick
is.
sides.
Yeah. and so that's what we ended up doing, right? And we got a great logo out of it
Yeah.
that fit what I wanted, fit what he wanted, and it was a perfect in the middle of both our logos. But there was a couple days in there where we were both, and we've talked about this, we were both a little frustrated at each other, right? What should have happened and what we did not do, what should have happened in that situation is we should have just called each other and said, dude, let's not make a stupid logo make us so frustrated,
Yeah.
right? We knew we were going to get over it. That's why we waited, right?
Right.
That's why we didn't talk for 2 days. But we should have just nipped it in the butt and said, we're talking about a stupid logo. Let's come to another conclusion, which we ended up ultimately doing.
Yeah.
But we're not going to agree on this dumb logo, so let us figure out another alternative. And graciously and humbly do that, but we didn't do that. And we just, like men sometimes do, we just put it under the rug and talked about it 6 months later.
Yeah, right. I do think, though, we took probably the second best option. You know, we could have talked about it and called each other and just figured it out.
Yeah.
And that's what you probably should do in most situations. But on the flip side, we didn't yell at each other. We didn't try to just destroy our relationship. We knew that, okay, this is something petty. Let's all just kind of sulk for a couple days ourselves and then get over it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
Some things you can do that. Some things you can't do that. You have to actually talk through. And
Yep.
but yeah, when you don't live with somebody, you know, you have that little bit of distance between you.
Yeah.
It's a little easier to do that.
Yep.
Yep.
So I think that was the second best approach that we took. Probably should have talked it out sooner. But
Yeah, but it
3
worked
days
out.
without you was
Yeah, it was a good breather.
yeah. Oh,
Just kidding. But anything else?
No.
Okay,
think we
let me read
covered
the verse one more time just to close this out.
All right.
Ephesians 5 says this: follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children, and walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and a sacrifice to God. This is Ground Grace. Love you guys. Catch you on the next one.